Excited to introduce our next guest. I've been talking about Ole Miss LSU. I've been trying to talk about Ole Miss. This guy knows a hell of a lot more about Ole Miss than I do. It's Brad Logan. He's a contributor to Inside the Rebels on 247 Sports and hosts the Believe in Ole Miss podcast on the Believe Network. Brad, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it. Sorry for the hesitation and delay, but I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me on tonight.
Let's get into it, man. Let's talk about this weekend. Obviously, LSU Ole Miss has a long, storied rivalry. Ole Miss comes in 7-0. Last time they came into LSU at 7-0 was in 2014. LSU upset them here. Different coaching staffs, whole different systems. Lane Kiffin's coming in. When you look at Lane Kiffin, or at least us, you think he's a passing guy. They throw the ball around. It's not so much the case this year. Ole Miss is running the football better than most teams in the country. Talk about what's kind of made them successful this year and what we should expect as LSU fans with them coming in this weekend.
I think more than anything, you're going to see Ole Miss try to run the football and set the line of scrimmage early. Now, I don't know that they can do that against a really good defensive line of LSU. You know, we saw LSU play really well against Florida, limit their rushing attack. So with Ole Miss, I think you'll see an early dose of Zach Evans and also running back Quinshon Judkins. Now, the Ole Miss offensive line has been one that's got two bookend tackles that are freshmen. I know that at LSU, that's also the same thing.
Yeah.
So with Ole Miss, you've got Jayden Williams on one side, you've got Micah Pettis on the other. So I thought that might be a bit of an anomaly, but then, you know, here we are, LSU week, and LSU's playing two freshman tackles as well. So you've got Nick Broker, who is all conference. He's pretty much got a number of things, I guess a lot of accolades in regards to his draft status. You know, during the offseason, we saw Nick Broker was the right tackle, and then he was graded pretty high by the NFL at guard, so he actually moved down to guard. Jeremy James, who played a lot of tackle last year, moved down to guard. So you've got two experienced guards, two inexperienced tackles, and then you've got Caleb Warren has kind of anchored this team at center. So they had some snapping issues earlier on this season. Actually had a bad snap last week against Auburn, but it didn't hurt. A lot of that is because Caleb Warren had been injured. So he's back and he's ready to go. They don't have a ton of injuries across that offensive front now, so I expect Ole Miss to be ready to go there. The issue has been wide receiver. You know, Jonathan, the talented player out of Brandon High School, has been their number one receiver. Malik Heath has been the number two receiver out of Mississippi State, that transfer. They didn't really have a number three or number four. Jordan Watkins, a transfer out of Louisville, has been kind of a bright and shining star the last couple of weeks. So we expect he to be that number three receiver. And then Dayton Wade, a walk-on, has played really well the last couple of weeks on some speed sweeps, had 63 yards on the 5 rushes last week against Auburn. So they've got kind of the wide receiving core knocked down. I think a lot of people are kind of looking at that Ole Miss defense. We thought, you know, defense may have been a little bit better than we thought, and then I think a lot of that is simply because of the competition. I don't think anybody's doubting that Ole Miss has not had a difficult schedule. 109, ranked 109th right now, so I understand everybody's trepidation. And I think that the Sharps and a lot of the Sharp money's coming in on LSU.
That's what I was going to get at. I'm confused. Like, LSU's a favorite. It's you know, I guess that's the reason, right?
Yeah, a lot of it is simply because of the mystique of Tiger Stadium. I think a lot of it, you look at preseason, you look at where the teams are. They're seeing that Brian Kelly, everybody knows that he's a good football coach, and they're seeing that Jayden Daniels is throwing the ball a whole lot better, specifically last week. A lot of these senior transfers on LSU defense really came together on the win last week against Florida. On the flip side, Ole Miss defense has given up a ton of yards to both Kentucky and Auburn on the ground. So I think a lot of people are seeing that this LSU defense has gotten a whole lot better. And then on the flip side, the Ole Miss offense has kind of gotten bogged down a little bit, rushing the ball really well, having trouble throwing the ball down the field. You know, we haven't talked about the quarterback in Jackson Dart. Has played really well, but Jackson Dart's a freshman, or at least it's his first year at Ole Miss, and it will be the first time he's ever been in an environment that he's going to face in Baton Rouge on Saturday. Now, I understand it's going to be an afternoon game. That really doesn't matter. They're going to face crowd noise like they've never had before. And so I think all that stuff, you know, a lot of people get bogged down in some of the history back in the 60s and 70s. At the end of the day, it's about athleticism. And Ole Miss, I think, is pound for pound pretty good right now with athletes with LSU, but I think LSU's getting the nod because the game is at home. It is a Tiger Stadium, and Ole Miss has not played an opponent as good as LSU this year. That's why you're seeing LSU as a 2-point favorite.
I want to get into a little bit of the Jayden Daniels stuff. Obviously, we're on the LSU side of it, and we've seen a little bit of the inconsistency. But you have seen him do some things throughout the course of the year. As bad as he's played sometimes early in the year, he still made winning plays. What kind of challenges does he bring to Ole Miss? Them coming in a defense that you said has been kind of inconsistent, and really hasn't played a guy that really can compare to what Jayden Daniels and LSU does offensively.
I think it's a scary, scary component for the Ole Miss defense because you have a very versatile quarterback. We knew that Jayden Daniels was going to be a running threat this year. What we saw against Florida State, we saw him run it really well, but he struggled throwing the ball down the field. Now, all of a sudden, we've seen over the last couple of games, specifically last week against Florida, he threw it incredibly well. And that's what I think Ole Miss is going to struggle with, is trying to keep him inside the pocket. The problem is one of the best defensive players for Ole Miss, Cedric Johnson, has been dealing with an injury. He's a bookend for this Rebel defense. And if they have Cedric Johnson on one side, the good news is Tavius Robinson's been playing well. But if they don't have Cedric Johnson on the edge to keep Daniels inside, it's going to be a problem. If he gets the corner, he's gone. I mean, he's going to get 10, 15 yards. Ole Miss defensively has been struggling at linebacker. Troy Brown's been dealing with an injury across his shoulder. Secondly, Corey Coleman's been dealing with a lower body injury. Those are the two starting linebackers. Then you start dipping into the second round of linebackers. They're not near as good as that first batch of linebackers for Ole Miss. So if Daniels can get outside the pocket, they cannot contain him. That's going to open up some passing lanes. Cornerbacks do not need to get put on an island. So if Ole Miss is going to bring pressure, they're going to bring pressure from the linebacking core. That's fine and dandy. But if you cannot keep Daniels inside the pocket, that's going to be a problem. Ole Miss really needs Cedric Johnson to play.
I want to talk a little bit of that because going into this year, LSU's most talented room is the wide receiver room, right? And they were talked about as having one of the best groups in the country. You started to see that a little bit last week, 50-50 balls, guys getting open, guys making plays on the outside. How does the secondary of Ole Miss stack up? I know you talked about their bookend. I know you talked about their linebackers. How does their secondary, because if they're going to bring pressure, you just said that they're going to be put on an island. How is their secondary, and how do you think they're going to stack up with the depth and the talent that LSU has in receiver?
Well, I think with Ole Miss, you look in the back half of this secondary, and you've got a leader that's leading this team in tackles. That's A.J. Finley. He's a senior. He's been around the program for quite a while. And I think it's easily, to me, the strongest part of this defense is the secondary. Trey Washington has played some. Isheem Young, the transfer out of Iowa State, has looked pretty good at strong safety. Otis Reese, the transfer out of Georgia, has played really well at defensive back. Tyshim Johnson and also Ladarius Sennison, the transfer out of Auburn, is one of the defensive backs. And, of course, cornerback Davis Igbinosun, the freshman out of New Jersey, was the number one defensive player in the entire state of New Jersey. They're really good. The problem last week against Auburn is they just didn't tackle well.
Right.
And that's one thing that the coordinator, Chris Partridge, said is, we've got to tackle better against LSU. We cannot allow the wide receivers, number one, we've got to keep them in front of us, and number two, we've got to get them to the ground as soon as they make contact with football. LSU got a great receiving core. They've got a couple of burners. That's one thing Ole Miss has not faced a lot of this year, are burners that can get up the field quickly. I think with Jayden Daniels, the problem with Ole Miss, I think, more importantly, is if Cedric Johnson does not play, I cannot stress this enough, is that opens the corner for Jayden Daniels. As long as they can keep him in the pocket, allow the defensive backs to do what they can to keep the receivers in front, limit the big plays, I think Ole Miss could be okay defensively. The problem, if he gets outside the pocket, that frees up some of the people down the field. Then all of a sudden you got 2 or 3 receivers running wide open. That's where you can get yourself into a lot of trouble.
You keep mentioning the defensive end for Ole Miss, and that just makes me wonder, where is he health-wise? Is it like a 50-50 ball? Is it, or?
That would be a good. I think you'll know it if he's in there. He's number 2. He's the best defensive player for Ole Miss. He dressed out last week, and Lane Kiffin said he wanted to go, he tried to go, and he just couldn't do it. So we do not have any specifics on this injury. We just know that it is a lower body injury. That's all we're being told. So we'll just have to wait and see on Saturday to see if he can go.
Just a gambling man over here, just trying to find an edge.
He's trying to hedge his bet, is what he's trying to do right now. In these types of games, when Lane Kiffin is coaching in these types of games, whether it be against, Alabama, any type of high-profile game, it always seems that Lane has something slippery up his sleeve. He does something that's going to be kind of throw a wrinkle into the game plan. Do you kind of get the feel that he's got something else that he's going to try to do that he hasn't shown, or do you think that he's going to just – it's a new Lane Kiffin, he's going to just kind of go, hey, this is what we're going to do, this is the game plan, we're going to kind of run it that way?
I feel quite certain that there are going to be some plays close to the best without question. One thing I would ask to tell you guys can monitor is that wide receiver Jalen Robinson has been dealing with a hamstring injury really the last 4 or 5 weeks. We've not seen him hardly at all. This could be a week we could see Jalen Robinson. He's the only person Ole Miss has right now that can take the top off of defense. They really have nobody. Jalen Robinson, the transfer out of UCF, Central Florida, he's the only one that we have not seen. So that's definitely something to monitor for LSU fans.
Seems like you're very cautiously optimistic on Ole Miss. My friend Lloyd here, who's my producer, is very cautiously optimistic on LSU. I'm a little bit more optimistic on LSU. What is the feeling like in Oxford with the other Ole Miss fans? Are they very cautiously optimistic? Like, oh, we're good, but like, how good are we? Or do they think, hey, we are good, we've seen it, doesn't matter who we've played, this is going to play against anybody that we play?
I think that's fair to say it's cautiously optimistic, but I have to go back to the fact that Ole Miss has the 109th ranked schedule in the country. And right now, up to this point, I think that's fair because and to be fair to the Ole Miss administration, when they scheduled Georgia Tech, they were coming out of an orange bowl.
Right.
And so that was an opportunity. Plus, during the summer, we thought Will Levis would be, all world at this point, and Kentucky has just not lived up to what we thought. And then we thought that Auburn may be a dumpster fire to Brian Harsin. I thought they played Ole Miss hard. I thought Ole Miss just didn't tackle well. We saw that Auburn and LSU, that game's always, is a nip and tuck game. So I think cautiously optimistic, but I think at the end of the day, it feels like LSU's kind of catching its stride, specifically at quarterback. And I really like, what LSU is doing defensively, quite honest with you. I think they're playing much better. They've got a ton of transfers in the secondary, as you guys know. So with transfers, it's interesting to see how these teams can gel midway through the year. And I think LSU and Brian Kelly have really put some things together down the stretch. And I think, looking at how these transfers are kind of gelling, and we'll see where things are going. Ali Gay has not had the year that we thought he was going to have. This could be a game to where we could see him have a big game. It's an opportunity. I think if you're LSU, you want to make Ole Miss make some mistakes. Jackson Dart has been prone to throw some interceptions. He's been prone to throw it into coverage. He did so against Georgia Tech. It didn't hurt him when they were winning 28-0. But if you're winning 17-10 or you're losing 17-10, that could prove to be very, very pivotal down the stretch for this Ole Miss team. I think cautiously optimistic. I don't know. I think there's a reason that the money is on LSU right now to -2. Vegas knows something. And I think quite frankly, Ole Miss really hasn't played anyone. But Lane Kiffin has went into hostile environments before. Ole Miss beat Tennessee in an environment that's very, very difficult. It's going to be very difficult to win on the road at LSU. So we'll see where things go. This team is 7-0. They've got LSU. They're going on the road next week to face an A&M team that we don't know anything about. They've got to go on to face an Arkansas team that we don't know a whole lot about. They get Alabama at home. Then they're at home against Mississippi State. There's an argument that Ole Miss could be 7-5 at the end of the year.
Oh, wow. No, that's like cautiously optimistic at all.
Wow, yeah. Well, the schedule starts now.
It sure does. And then there's also an argument to be made that what if they win 2 of these games?
Right.
So that's all of a sudden 9-3. And at the end of the year, Ole Miss was 9-3. That's a pretty good year. Well, they were 7-0.
Yeah, right.
LSU's in the same boat.
Yeah. The good news is they're 7-0. The bad news is the next 5 are going to be an absolute,
right.
absolute hookers down the stretch.
You're bowl eligible, though. That's all we're fighting for here. You're at least that. When you talk about LSU, and you obviously list some of their strengths and weaknesses, I want to talk a little bit about the weaknesses. When you see LSU play and you see special teams, what are your thoughts going into Baton Rouge?
Opportunity?
Trust me, it's not if, it's when, Coach.
Well, I don't know if we'll see Besh, catching punts.
I don't know. Brian Kelly keeps saying that he's the best guy they got, and they have confidence in him. That's what he keeps saying. So we'll see.
Well, I mean, they capitalized against Mississippi State. They had a fumbled punt that when Mississippi State at that point was, I think, leading 14-7, and the Bulldogs held LSU and forced a punt. I think maybe in the third quarter, maybe the fourth quarter. But as soon as LSU got that turnover, it was over. I mean, once they scored, tied the game up, that was it. So, Ole Miss has done quite well in special teams. Their field goal kicker, Jonathan Cruz, a transfer out of Charlotte, 7-7 on field goals and hasn't missed an extra point. Needless to say that when Ole Miss faced LSU, they had whatever the winner is, the Luke Rosa Award winner on their team. They missed 2 field goals to get to Atlanta.
Yep.
So, special teams hasn't been great to Ole Miss. I could go all the way back to 1987 when David Browndyke missed the field goal and Ole Miss won down in Baton Rouge. So special teams has always been key. We can go back further than 1959 if you'd like.
I think we won't remember that one.
Hey, you and Brian Kelly, you need to have a conversation with Brian Kelly. He's trying to get all the history of the LSU Ole Miss. It seems like you got it all down to a science. You need to call him.
This series has been one that's been a lot of fun to follow over the years. And then, of course, we can go back to 1972 when LSU got 2 plays in 4 seconds and Ole Miss lost by 1 point down in Baton. So,
the clock's away. We're on our own time over here, Coach.
Well, what about the 2 where Les Miles forgot to call a timeout and Jordan Jefferson couldn't get the ball spiked and Ole Miss wins? A couple of years later, Andrew Ritter kicks a game-winning field goal. So special teams, late second, it's kind of favored LSU, but Ole Miss has had some advantageous plays as well.
Well, I can tell you this year I don't think the special teams is too advantageous for LSU the way it's been going. Hopefully that gets changed this weekend. Brad, look, I appreciate your time. We're not going to keep you much longer. Well, before you go, we ask everybody that comes in and talks about their opposing team, what is your prediction of the game? Are you going to be in Baton Rouge for the game? And what is your prediction? What do you think the score is going to be?
Simply because I think that Ole Miss really has to have this game. Going to pick Ole Miss 28-24 in an absolute burner. But if you told me it was LSU 31-24, I wouldn't be surprised. But for the sake of Inside the Rebels and affiliate of 24/7,
yeah,
had a job to keep.
Listen,
in the most unenthusiastic pick that I would never put on anybody in the world. What happens on Saturday? So absolutely none.
So you're not putting any money on that pick?
Oh, hell yeah, I'm going to bet it.
Yeah.
No.
Well, you know what? My producer's probably going to hedge his bet with that bet just because you said it, just so it makes him feel
make
better.
Sure this number 2's out the game.
That's it. Brad, man, I appreciate it. Enjoy Baton Rouge. Enjoy the game. Hopefully that you are wrong. Hopefully you're more right on the 31-24. But it's going to be a good game. That's all we can hope for. And the weather's going to be perfect. So we're going to enjoy it. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you.
Yep, I appreciate it.